a big deal for Iowa, and I'm sure that'll have more comments on it later on. We also tackled other issues such as just carbon pipelines. There were visitors down at the State House out there meeting with their legislators as well on those sort of subjects. We have, of course, property tax reform is out there as well. But a lot of issues, we're tackling a lot of them. Me personally, I've been involved in several bills, and that will be coming up in the judiciary and also health and human services. I also personally serve on commerce, appropriations, ways and means, and workforce. And so it was a good week. If you remember me from last year, what a difference a year makes. And so it's a pleasure to be out there and serving District 5. So that's my opening comments, and I'll be looking forward to hearing your questions.
Wonderful, thank you. And Senator Lynn Evans?
Yeah, I represent Senate District 3, and this is my first 3 weeks in office. You know, and I'm now going through what Senator Rowley went through a year ago, and he's been wonderful helping guiding me through the process. I serve on a number of committees that are very busy early in the session already. Judiciary Committee, Health and Human Services. Senator Rowley and I both serve on that one. Also the Education Committee and Natural Resources. So a lot of bills have already been run through those committees and should be going out hopefully to the floor for a vote here soon. And I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and comments. So thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
And thank you for being here. And Representative Jones.
Thank you, Sharifa, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting these forums. And is it Farm Bureau who paid for the
actually, today it's sponsored by the Spencer Chamber.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you to the Chamber twice. We are 19 days now into the legislative session, so we're about 17% done. So we just need to keep chugging right along. I know people often say, well, why is this moving so fast? And it's like, well, session moves fast. So we're just going to keep on going. We passed 3 bills off the House floor this week, and John Wills and I were kind of the champions of all of them. So John ran the Students First bill. He and I both have been tackling non-compete agreements for mental health providers. We had that bill last year, and then this year everybody just seemed to think it was a great idea. I don't know what happened, what we did in the interim, but everybody got behind it, and it passed off the House floor with 95-0 votes. So that was pretty exciting. And then also a bill that passed off the floor actually was a former constituent of mine and now a constituent of John Wills, had brought the issue of prop money to me. You can go on Amazon and buy bundles of what looks like money. For $7, you can get like $20,000 of fake money, and it looks really real, but in the corner it'll have like a size 10 font that says copy, or where it says United States of America, in that exact same font it'll say this is not real money. And it's really hard to tell the difference, and especially if you get handed a bundle of this money. So what was happening is that people were trying to prosecute for forgery or counterfeit money, but crafty defense attorneys, and perhaps our county attorney Travis could interject on this. But what's happening is that it is clearly not real money. It says copy. It says this is not real money, and so there was a Court of Appeals decision that said nope. It clearly says it's not real money, so it can't be considered forgery or theft or counterfeit or anything like that. So passed a bill off the House floor to resolve that because we had a small business owner out of Ruthven that was basically taken. I mean, because they took what was purported to be this money. Committees I serve on: Judiciary, Ways and Means, Agriculture, Environmental Protection, and I still chair the Administrative Rules Review Committee. That committee is basically where bills go to be implemented. But with the governor's announcement on the moratorium of administrative rules, things will start to get pretty interesting on that committee. So hopefully folks are paying attention. And if you're unfamiliar with this process of forums, I think we're on the radio, we're on TV, they play it multiple times. And I always like to remind people, this is shown via MediaCom in 6 states. So this forum is really kind of the highlight, I guess, and one that's really shown far and wide because our constituents ask such great questions and are so thoughtful about the approach to their issues. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you.
Great, thank you. And Representative Wills, if you would like to round out this.
Yeah, and thank you for hosting, and thank you all for being here on this snowy winter day. I didn't expect there to be as many people here, so that's a good testament to that this is a good forum. I just want to say ditto to all of the above, because all three of the folks that have talked before me have raised good points. We have really dived. Is that the right word? Dived or dove in? We've jumped into our committee and subcommittee works, and we have really moved forward with all of the work that is the legislature. And so this past week, in addition to the Student First Act, it was just busy. It was one of the busier days that I can remember for a long time, just because of all the subcommittees, all the committees, and it's going to get even busier next week and the week after with those committees, and maybe a little bit of debate. I would concur with Representative Jones as well. While the bill that deals with now, what is it? Contract non-compete agreements that didn't go as far as what we would have liked. It really tackled the problem that is happening here in Spencer with mental health, and so I think that's going to be a good thing. As far as the property money, actually one of the legislators got up on the floor of the House and said, "This is kind of embarrassing, but I got taken for $20 by one of those $20 bills," and he's like, "There's nothing I could do about it." So that was kind of a really hit home kind of moment, and then you kind of wonder how many of those have I touched and passed on. And he was actually said it's embarrassing because he took this $20 from somebody, he didn't know who, and then tried passing it off, and somebody said, "This isn't real money." And so that's how he found out. We're going to really deal with a lot of things. We've already started talking in earnest about state supplemental aid. I think the Senate has a bill out that's a placeholder bill. And we will probably be putting a bill out as well with an agreed to amount, I hope, in the next week, and we'll be debating that within the next week or two, and we will meet our 30-day deadline for that. So those are the things that are happening right now. Really interested in hearing the questions and thoughts that you all have.
Wonderful. Thank you to all four of you. So we're going to go ahead and dive into some questions. And with the education bill being the hot topic, obviously, we have several questions regarding this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to combine the questions because there are several aspects that were asked regarding the education bill. And I know several constituents that are in the crowd have also asked questions relating to this, specifically Bill Kirstein, also Jan Myers, and also we received an email question that we're going to try to wrap into all of this because I know this is a big conversation topic. So I'll go ahead and condense them all and give everyone an opportunity to speak. So Iowa's new law has many pros and cons. Would it be more palatable if all types of schools had to follow exactly the same rules in dealing with individual students? And with this, can you also touch on the separation of church and state, the oversight that this will, or what will occur within the oversight of public and private schools? And then also, if this bill proves detrimental in the future, would it be repealed? I know there was also the conversation that was emailed to me related to situations in public schools where maybe there were clubs that were started, whether it was for LGBTQ students, things of that sort, and if this is also trying in some way to address those maybe clubs that are, some school districts may see as questionable. I think specifically the question related to school districts that are in some of the larger communities, larger cities in Iowa, and so if those were ever of any consideration. Okay, so with that, a very big question, and Representative Wills, I'm gonna let you kick this off.
I thought you would. So let's get into it. First of all, same rules for individual students. Can we have the same rules? Well, basically we do. What we have is the private schools and public schools must treat, it's in the Civil Rights Code, must treat students the same regardless of which school they go to. They do not have to accept all students, and that's not something that I'm willing to move forward. I don't know if anybody up here is willing to force schools to do that, because number one, if you have an atheist that wants to get into a Christian school, that's just not the same values, and that Christian school has the right to have freedom of religion. They have the right to have association with folks that they feel best suited. And so I think that's where the question is going to. I think that's the gist of the question is, do they treat people like all of the schools that I talk to, all the superintendents that I talk to, many of them are taking people with IEPs. Many of them are taking children with disabilities. One school superintendent even said, we have hired personal assistants to take care of a student, just one student. Also, the AEAs work with those students. And so the schools that I've talked to really said that they do accept many students. They don't take all of them for the most part, like the level 3, the ones that need an individual person. The really cool thing about this bill is that because there will be less students potentially in a school, they're going to have less students, but they're going to have about the same amount of money for the most part. And so they're going to be able to treat those students better and with better care. Let's talk about the separation of church and state. This has gone through Supreme Court after Supreme Court challenge. Every time it has gone through a Supreme Court challenge, it is found not to be in violation of separation of church and state, as long as every school is treated equally. And so that would mean if you have a school that worships butterflies, the state of Iowa couldn't say you cannot have ESAs because you worship butterflies. But as long as we say, yeah, if you worship butterflies and you want to develop a school, you're eligible for ESA money. So that's the gist of it. Supreme Court challenge after Supreme Court challenge has said that. Oversight. We have developed in this bill a lot of oversight. First of all, they have to be accredited schools, just the same as our public schools. So they have to follow the same state of Iowa accreditation standards. Now, they may not be accredited through the state of Iowa. They may have accreditation through an organization that specializes it, but they still must follow the exact same accreditation standards as our public schools in the state of Iowa. In addition, our students that are taking ESAs or ESA money, they must take the standardized testing that all public school members must take. And so, and those results must be reported to the state along with social economic data, and then they must also evaluate graduation data and any kind of disciplinary data. And so there's oversight. Really, the most important person in this situation, though, is the parent. The parent is the one that really needs to have that oversight. We're going to ensure that those students have a good education through our oversight measures, but the parent is the one that has the onus to decide what is right for their child and what is not right for their child, or what they want to have their child learn or what they do not want to have. Like using the example before, if they want to have their children learn about worshiping butterflies, then that's what they surely can. Let's see. Detrimental in the future. So if this bill ends up being detrimental in the future, of course, I can honestly say all four of it. I'm not speaking for you all because you're going to have a chance to speak, but if it doesn't work or if it has major failures or flaws, we're going to either fix it or we're going to repeal it. That's just the way things work. In the state of Iowa and in this country, we are the laboratory of democracy. Is the term that I've heard often. And so in that laboratory, you do things, and if it doesn't work, you reverse course and you start over again. That's just the way this country works, and each state, it's the best system in the world. Each state is able to do that. Each state is able to determine what's best for their people and what's best for their citizens. Situation in schools. I have never said in a general term that there are in a general term that there's bad stuff happening in schools. When I say there's bad stuff happening in schools, I give specific examples. For example, one of the examples was used. I said there were drag queen shows. This actually happened in a school in Iowa. Ankeny School District had a drag queen show that was a student. It was a student group that did it, but it was on school grounds. It was a or a school-sponsored event. Now, I've gotten phone call after phone call from parents in Ankeny that they want to get out. They want to move. They feel like their values have been violated, and they just want to get out of that school. And in many instances, the schools around Ankeny are not able to accept the public schools are not able to accept any new students because they're full. Public schools. There are some private schools that have students that have availability.
Oh, okay.
And so that's just one example. I could go into depth on books like Push. Push is a book that's in many of our high schools. I believe the last time I read or heard was over 200 schools in our state have a book called Push, which talks in graphic detail about homosexual relations between 8-year-olds. All right? Now, if we'd make that into a movie and have age-appropriate actors, I believe our Mr. Police Officer back here would be going to arrest that person because it'd be child porn. But yet, those books are allowed in schools, and those books are, as I said, 200 schools, and they're on shelves, free to be taken. Now, I'm not a book banner. I don't care if those books are in the schools. What I do say is parents should have a choice in whether those books are taken out by their child. Parents should have a choice in whether those books are viewed and read by their children. And that's the major distinction. So I guess I've really gone through a lot of the examples. I think I've answered the question. If not, follow-up questions, I'd be happy to try to answer.
That's great, and I think we'll probably have a little bit of back and forth on this conversation. The other thing I do want to add, and if you do want to add comment to this, I can come back to you, certainly Representative Wills, is also a question relating specifically to how this will impact homeschool students and families. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass this on to Representative Jones.
Okay, so I have a list of things. So first, I think standardization is probably what is causing some of the problem here, in that not everybody learns in the same way, right? And so we have tried to adapt our educational systems to allow for kids to learn in different capacities. And especially since COVID, we've learned that some kids do really well online, some kids don't. Some age groups succeed, some others don't. And so I guess this is just kind of another effort to give parents some more tools to find different options for their kids. When it comes to separation of church and state, I heard this argument a lot. So I spent a lot of time with the Constitution, and I harken back to the days of law school, and I don't know if I've spent so much time with the Constitution since law school, but the Establishment Clause says that the government cannot establish a religion. And that's an important piece of our Bill of Rights. And what's interesting there is that this is not creating a religion. And while we are funding entities that do offer religion into their curriculum, this isn't the government establishing a religion. This has been tested. John Wills was correct. The state of Iowa has funded the Iowa Tuition Grant for 42 years. Yeah. And the Iowa Tuition Grant provides students who do not have means to go to a private institution the ability to do so. And I would venture to guess that institutions like Buena Vista University probably would not be here if it weren't for the Iowa Tuition Grant. And I think that's probably settled law that this money can go to entities that provide religion into their curriculum or entity. As for oversight, I think the Administrative Rules Review Committee is going to see a lot of things come up regarding oversight as this program is implemented. So be watching for that, because it's going to have to happen very quickly if our kids are going to school on August 23rd. So, so right now, the RFP, I think, went out on Friday. Is that correct? I got the email.
Tuesday.
Oh, it went out on Tuesday.
I think so.
Okay, so the RFP is out. They're going to have to move pretty quickly on securing that vendor, and then once that's done, then we'll have to write the rule. Not me. I do not write the rules. I make sure they comply with code. The Department of Education will be writing those rules to ensure that there is proper oversight to make sure that that money is actually going for genuine educational expenses. When a repeal, I would certainly anticipate tweaks of this legislation probably every year because this is new, this is big, this is bold. That's fine. That happens all the time. That's what the legislature is there for, to make sure our laws are working, and that's kind of just routine practice. Is this retaliation? I don't think it's retaliation, but I think there are a number of parents who are just simply fed up. And they're fed up of not being listened to. They're fed up of being told you can't talk to me when you're elected officials, and that's not necessarily happening here. But I think particularly in the metro schools, that's happening. Can you not hear me?
You died down, like it turns on.
Red. Can you hear me now? Does it just shut off? You talk too much? All right.
Oh, if we, that's
So I don't necessarily think it's a retaliation, but it is coming as a result of the number of people who are contacting their legislators and the governor about
Speak up.
about not being able to have a voice with their elected officials. Turn on the one next to you.
There you go. How about this?
Scooch over? Okay. I talked so much, I broke the microphone. Okay, so, thanks. Interestingly enough, I mean, some folks are saying like this is because of, curriculums that are being introduced in public schools that we don't agree with and those kinds of things. And that's interesting, and correct me if I'm wrong, John Wills, the ESA program very well could establish schools that are exclusive to LGBTQ students, right? So, I mean, I think it's kind of an interesting argument. Well, this is retaliation against LGBTQ issues, but this is actually allowing them to create their own school. So, I mean, it kind of gave them some flexibility. So I'm not sure that argument really stands. As it relates to homeschooling, I don't think these homeschoolers were included in this legislation, so I don't think it does impact homeschooling at all.
Only accredited schools.
Oh, only accredited schools. So I think I made it through the list.
I believe you have. Thank you. All right, and Senator Evans.
On a number of those topics, I think it's been very well stated, and all four of us, I don't want to speak for Dave, but we're all going to be in agreement on those points that have been raised up to this point. I do want to talk a little bit about accreditation and what that means in the state of Iowa. And Iowa Code 256.11, it specifically addresses how private schools can be accredited in the state of Iowa. And they can go through the same process as the public schools, or they can use an outside accreditation, but that also has to be pre-approved by the Department of Education. So the accreditation standards are pretty strict and in that respect. So there are going to be some checks and balances on how schools are administered, what they're going to be teaching, and how they address civil rights code and things like that. One point I would like to make in this, and I am the oddball up here, just so you know. My opposition was very simply this. Parents should have the right to have the say in how and where their children are educated. My concern with this was there was no language in the bill that specifically protected those parents and those children that have special learning needs. To me, it was something that was important, and I talked to a number of people about the issue. It's not as simple to address it as it sounds on the surface, because if you're going to ensure that those kids are accepted by a private school, you also have to ensure that those private schools have the resources they need to be able to address those learning needs for those children. So now you're all talking about ways and means, you're talking about some rule restructuring outside of this bill. So do I think it's possible? Absolutely. Do I think morally that if I have a child who learns differently than your child, should I still have the right to make a private school choice? I do believe that. So that was my stance on that. I fully support moving forward this legislation. I think it's going to be good in the long run. There's nothing wrong with competition. And, they're going to argue that, competition already exists, but in this case, it's competition from one public school to another public school, or the choice to homeschool. Adding in a private school choice, I think is reasonable. And the question is, if you're afraid of kids leaving your school, one, you don't probably have faith in your public school like you should, and two, you need to be able to ask the question why. Why would someone want to remove their child from your school to go to another school, whether it's open enrollment or to private school, and are you willing to address that to meet the needs of those kids moving forward? Okay, with that, and the whole establishment clause has been addressed. It's been tested in other states. I'm sure it'll be tested here in Iowa as well. It will be upheld, I'm sure. So, thanks.
Thank you. And Senator Rowley.
Well, almost everything's been said, but I'll just follow up each point. One thing that comes to mind immediately is accreditation. Everything funnels up to the Department of Education in the state of Iowa. There's checks, balances there, and going forward. So all schools are going to be accredited and have to go through those same standards in order to be approved. As far as all rules for students, I think that addresses that in the oversight. We talked about the Supreme Court, and of course the same civil rights are applied to all of us. And that's not going to make a difference at all. One thing I want to point out, though, too, there's something I learned down there is there's always been pre-K type sharing agreements with private schools and public schools and working together. And those monies, of public money, have always been there. The Iowa Tuition Grant is like you said, a long-standing program. So as far as the issue of public versus private, maybe unbeknownst for a lot of us, that's already been there. The other point I'd like to make, too, is that just in the discussion and the debate, that the fact that SNAP programs are out there, supplemental nutritional programs. So for food stamps, we don't direct people and say you have to go this store, and that's it. And also Medicaid. We don't restrict people where they apply federal funds, or private tax funds or public tax funds for those sort of things. So that's been going on for a long time too. So because of all the issues that have come up in the transition of education over the last 30 years, as an example, community colleges, universities, different venues of education on post-high school education, it's not a surprise, I think, to all of us that education's changing and evolving. And this goes back to the gut level of parents' choice. I want to address also books. There's no doubt about it. There's some very disturbing material. And I always carry with me some samples of it. And so does Representative Wills, I'm sure, and all of us probably, and some that can direct you to that. And if parents aren't aware of that stuff going on and they find that out, I believe they do have that choice. They have the right to communicate their concerns, and they have the right, if those concerns aren't met, to make a change. I've talked to parents who said, yeah, they told me I could move out of the district. And to me, that's just not a good option that you're going to tell somebody they need to sell their house and move to another school district in order to fit and take care of that problem. I also want to talk about bullying, assaults, all the things that go on. Maybe we don't see it here in rural Iowa. And by the way, I have never seen that personally with my kids. They all graduate from school, public schools. And if you would have given me $10,000 each for all 4 of our kids, they would still go to schools they went to, the public school. And so I want to make that. People say, well, you're just saying that. No, it's a fact. It's about community. It's about your friends, about your neighbors, the teachers, the administration. That's the holistic, that's the whole deal there. For someone to change schools for their children, there has to be an event. And what I saw down at the Capitol and learned over the last year since we all first met, there are events that take place. It isn't a simple drag queen show. It's bowling. I have films of a girl getting beat up in a classroom in our metro schools. And that can happen in rural schools too. So as far as the whole idea of that choice, I think it's paramount. I just want to touch on banned books. So when this came up last year, there was a real assault on us as legislators saying you're Nazis or you're banning books. Well, I want to point out that over the last 10 years, we've watched other groups ban books such as Uncle Tom's Cabin, Gone with the Wind, To Kill a Mockingbird, Huckleberry Finn. And so it shouldn't be a surprise that, yeah, some parents may find the books that we're talking about offensive as well for their children. So I'll leave it at that. I do support the bill. It is now law. And as we've mentioned, that's what legislature's for. We try to watch for those unintended consequences, but it's a good law, and I look forward to having it move forward.
Thank you, Senator Rowley. I know Representative Wills would like a follow-up to that question.
Yeah, just real quickly, because the ESA part, the educational savings part of this bill, takes up all the oxygen in the room. But there's another part of this bill that's very positive for public schools. Public schools have been, as a previous superintendent, yeah. So as a previous superintendent, you can back me up on this. School boards have been screaming at us to allow them to use categorical money that is unspent, that is they're just not able to spend it for the category in which it sits. And so part of this in Division 3 of the bill, and so it wasn't brought up in a question, so I didn't want to answer, but I want to make sure that you all know the full bill. This bill will allow schools to offer additional salary increases, bonus increases to students using that categorical funding. So this potentially, and I made as an example, if every school in the state was equal in the categoricals, and they're not all equal, but if they were all equal, we could give every teacher in the state of Iowa a $6,400 bonus. Now that's a pretty big deal. That's how much money is sitting there being unspent. And so we need to talk about the positives of this bill. I think it's all positive, but many people on the other side don't want to talk about that part. And that's, I think, one of the more important parts of the bill.
Senator Evans, if you'd like to follow up, and then I'm going to add a little question to this since we are still talking about education. We've had another question that kind of relates to this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do want to talk about the positives of the bill. I've been in John's ear for years, sitting on the other side. Actually, when I stood at the mic and asked some of these questions. Flexibility in how we spend our money in our public schools is key. The regulations over the year have tightened down so much on schools on how they can spend their funds. It's to the point where we're given categoricals for certain perceived needs. Well, my school district might have a need in this category, but not so much of a need over here, but a school on the other side of the state, they really need the funds in this category, but not so much over here. And because of the way school finance works, you can't simply transfer from one to the other. Now, we can get into the difference between home rule and Dillon's rule, and that's a whole other topic that if you have an hour, I can give you a lecture on that. But the fact of the matter is, I always felt handcuffed as a superintendent that I could not make decisions about where those funds could go to meet the needs of my kids. So I've been pushing for that. This is a good thing. I don't think everybody in the public, superintendents understand, but I don't think everybody in the public understands the power behind just that ability right there. And then the other one that hasn't been mentioned yet is we're going to have the opportunity to dig into Chapter 12 of the Iowa Code. Chapter 12 of the Iowa Code is what governs how we administer schools, what we offer and teach, basically how we approach teaching and learning in the state. We continually have added over the years to Chapter 12. Again, applying what I am going to simply refer to as handcuffs and how we can educate our child. If I want restrictions loosened from Chapter 12, I actually have to go to the Department of Ed, plead my case, and more than likely I'm going to get a no unless I want to start a charter school or some other innovative practice, which is very difficult. So the ability to dig into that, throw out some of the things that no longer apply, maybe give schools an opportunity on how they can meet graduation requirements in different ways through project-based learning, getting kids out into internships, and those things is going to be very powerful. And I guess I'm going to make a little plea to anybody listening. If you're in a public school, really push your school into assisting us and digging into that, and give us some advice and ideas on what we can do to make our public schools better through Chapter 12. So, thanks.
Great, thank you. I know we've been talking about education significantly or primarily, but because of this question, Adam, I'm going to go ahead and have you come up to the mic and you can ask your question. He has one regarding the 6% funding raise to public school.
Megan Jones, you said you're working on supporting a 6% raise to public school funding. Any updates?
So the Senate dropped their supplemental state aid bill. It's kind of just a placeholder. Is that correct? And that says 3%?
2% right now, it's just a placeholder.
Okay, so 2%. So
get
basically, so it's a bill just to get out of because it's got to get moving, right? So it's got to get out of subcommittee, it's got to get out of committee. So it's been introduced and it's chugging right along until we kind of make the decision as to what that number is going to be. I told the speaker I want 6% because I know how negotiations work. The schools are asking for 5%, so I'd like to see 5%. Now, there's a lot of simmering, I think, in the House about a 3+2 proposal, which sounds like it gets us to 5%, but the reason you set supplemental state aid at 3% and then add in a supplemental state aid of 2%, because if you just build it into your supplemental state aid, it forces ESAs up, and since we just set the ESA number, we would just do a +2 supplemental appropriation that would be equivalent to what 2% would have been. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'd like to see that bad boy in the double digits, but it's a good start.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of money, right? I mean, the K-12 education is what, 44%? Isn't that with
That's
college?
all
That's with the
education.
region, so 50.
46 or 47% of the total budget goes to K-12.
Can you turn your mic on? Thank you.
I think 46, 47% of the total state budget goes to K-12 public education. When you add the regent universities onto that, then it's up north of 50%.
So each percentage point that you put on that is a lot of money. Like, it sounds really nice. Oh, just move it from 3 to 4 or something, but it's a good chunk of change.
All right, thank you for that question. We're going to go ahead and move on to another topic, and I would invite Lori Pearson to come to the microphone. She has a question regarding HS 90 on cosmetology.
Hello, thank you for having me here today. I just wanted to visit a little bit. I know that I visited with Megan yesterday a little bit about this, but this bill came across my desk at work, and I just wanted to have an open conversation about the intentions of this bill. It is the HSB Bill 90. It pertains strictly to cosmetology here in our state of Iowa, where it's at committee right now. The bill wants to change the required cosmetology hours from 2,100 hours for licensing down to 1,000 hours of licensing. As an instructor of cosmetology, 1,000 hours of instruction will mostly be taking place within the theory part of cosmetology. That is not enough hours. We spend right now 765 hours in nothing but theory. So a student spends their entire first semester with us sitting in theory class and learning about our world of cosmetology. If we cut to 1,000 hours, that does not leave very much time for our students to gain the skills that they need to be successful when they go out into the work field. I think, the state of Iowa has always been pushing very forward to keeping our community safe, public health safe. I think we did a tremendous job with COVID, and that did involve the cosmetology field as well. So with that being said, cutting our hours to just 1,000 for licensure does not set our students up to be successful. I have concerns about the chemicals that we use within the salon. Without proper education, unfortunately, we will have people who will leave, hopefully not, but they may leave with damaged hair. That, to me, that's super important. I just feel that it's super important that we, with this bill at committee, that we really look at the pros and cons of moving to 1,000. I personally cannot find any pros for it. My biggest concern is also for our students that would leave with 1,000 hours of education. Some of our surrounding states still require 2,000 hours. The minimum state closest to us is 1,800 hours. So our students, I have had 2 students graduate from the college, and they have gone from Iowa because of our 2,100 hours and moved to Wisconsin or to Minnesota, and they are accepted, and they only have to take a small exam with their laws.
Thank you for your question, Lori. I'm
Okay.
going to go ahead and we are going to start the response with
Okay.
Representative Jones.
Okay?
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Lori. We had a great conversation about this yesterday, and so there's a huge effort in Des Moines to reduce licenses and to reduce the burdens that licenses place on Iowans. And I respect that effort. We are one of the heaviest licensed states in the nation, I think maybe 4th or so. So we do need to tackle licensure, but for some reason, we're always going after the cosmetologists. And there are, you know what, the only cosmetologists and funeral directors seem to cause all kinds of stirs at the Capitol that people just don't realize. That's just some of the stuff we deal with. But so yeah, cutting it from 2,100 to 1,000, that seems pretty dramatic, right? I can understand trying to link up with states around us or have some kind of, reciprocity with other states and do 1,800 or whatnot. But cutting it from 2,100 to 1,000 is pretty dramatic. And Lori didn't share this fact, but she shared it with me yesterday. It takes 3 minutes for a bleach to go wrong. And then your hair falls out. So we don't want that to happen to Iowans, and we need to protect them from that, and that's why we have professional license in the first place. I fully appreciate what you all are doing because there is a lot of chemistry, a lot of chemicals, and certainly we want to make sure that our folks are trained to be able to do those services. And I certainly appreciate that. During COVID, when all the hair salons were shut down, my husband tried to shave his own head, and I wrongly assumed that I could help with that, and he's bald now. So there you have it. I have great appreciation for what you all do, and I don't think we should be cutting it that much. Thanks.
All right, recognizing that this is a House-Senate bill, I do want to allow the others to weigh in on this. So Senator Evans, if you would like to have any additional comments.
Well, since this is a bill that's in the House right now, so I really don't have
Yep.
any direct input on it at
Okay.
this time, but I've
Yep.
written a number down, and I am going to go take a look and read through that bill when I get back home.
Perfect. So if there's no other comments, Representative Wills, and then, yep.
So I would just make it, in addition, say HSB, it means House Study Bill. And so House Study Bill, a lot of times those bills are just thrown out there to get a conversation started. That's just what happens. It's somebody came to the chair of that committee and said, hey, we'd really like to see this, or we'd really like to see that. And so then we just throw it out there, and it's a study bill. So we're going to study the issue. That means we may do something, we may not. It may change drastically. It may change hardly not at all. But that's kind of what I would say. I don't know that we would have a lot of support for 1,000 hours. But with that said, we are one of the most licensed states in the nation. I think we have 179,
Actually, they can't give me a number.
Okay.
We have so many licensed entities, and I have asked that question multiple times, and the answer is we can't get you a number because there's licenses, there's certificates, there's gold stickers, so it's so many that we can't even keep track.
But can you imagine each one of those 179 licenses, each one has a board, so the state of Iowa is paying for that board to meet, paying for that board to do their job. That's a lot. So our state government a lot of your tax dollars are going to those 179 groups to license maybe something that doesn't need to be licensed. Now, I'm not here to say we're going to get rid of licenses that need to be licensed, but let's be reasonable and understand that some of our licenses probably are just a money-making opportunity for the state. That's the easiest way to say it.
Thank you. And Senator Rowley, if you want to talk about HSB 90.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of this bill, but I concur with Representative Will's study bill is a question and answer period where we explore it and then typically make those decisions from there. I do have a question, though. You mentioned Wisconsin licensing up there or the training that they go through. Is there reciprocity with Wisconsin for Iowa?
Yes.
So they can.
Lori, if you would come to the mic, please, that would be great.
Yes, there is. And the student that I'm referring to, she just had to take their Iowa law exam.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Because it is a workforce issue we look at, too.
Correct.
You know, as far as, you know, if there's a
Correct.
shortage and all
Yeah,
that.
and I do worry about that because if students do, because students, they like to be fluid and they like to move around, you know, because they're young and they can do so because they're not tied with families. So if we drop to 1,000, that's going to change that for them because there is only one state in our United States that is 1,000 hours, and that's in Massachusetts.
Okay. Thank you, Lord.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you, Sharif.
Thank you, Senator Rowley. All right, the next question we have relates to just what is happening in both the House and Senate to help average Joe citizen. And so I'm wondering with that question, if you would talk a little bit about the property tax reform and the conversations surrounding that. And with that, we are going to start with Senator Evans.
Okay, in the Senate, I've yet to see the tax reform bill, but I am excited to start digging into that. You know, this go around, it's going to be property tax is going to be really the big thing that's going to be on the agenda. And I pay property tax. I'd like to pay less, or at least have the ability to not have those raised as much in the future. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what Senator Dawson puts before us. I'm hoping next week or in the coming 2 weeks anyway, we should see something. I think the House has seen, correct me if I'm wrong, at least seen some beginning stages of that. So they're going to be able to speak more about what's in there into the bill than what I can now. But tax reform is a big thing in the state. It's one of the top priorities we have going in, not only last year, but going into this year. And I'm confident we're going to come out of this with something that's going to be good for all of us.
Thank you, Senator Evans. And Senator Rowley.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything yet on the property tax relief bill from Senator Dawson. It'll be coming out soon, but for the average Joe, of course, all of us would like to see property tax relief because it's something that hits us every year, and we get that statement and we look at it and wonder. But I will say also to average Joe that keep in mind counties where we live, from the local government on up, that's where it all starts. For our services, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's emergency services, whether it's government, schools, all of these services come together and culminate and go into some of the factors dealing with property taxes, of course. And so that would be always something that I want to make sure that we're using due diligence to make sure we're not cutting ourselves short at the county level and local level, to make sure as we make adjustments, which I believe they should be made, but that will be a consideration that will be forefront for me as a senator in District 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rowley. And Representative Wills.
Yeah, I just took a few notes here. How does it help the average Joe? And that's just the average Iowan. Some may own property, some may not. Some pay income tax, some may not. Some may pay fees, some may not. But really, we need to look at the general Iowan and understand that everything that we do as far as property tax and income tax affects every Iowan in a positive way. If we are to look at working on property taxes, if you don't own property, if you go live in an apartment, that apartment still pays property taxes, and part of your the fee that you pay, the rent that you pay to that property owner goes to pay for that property taxes. And so the property taxes are high, your rent is going to go higher. And so everything that we do in the state of Iowa, but it goes beyond that. It goes to fees. Senator Rowley talked about the fees. We have fees that the state and the counties are making money off of, and then we have fees that the state and the county are losing money off of. We need to look at those. I believe that fees are just, they're a fee for a job to be done, and they should pay for themselves. And so me as a citizen, I pay a fee. I'm not even naming the fee. I pay a fee for a car licensure fee. That's, you go to the treasurer's office and you license your car, and you pay a fee to do that. That fee should cover the labor, it should cover the work that county treasurer's office does. Recording fees, all of these fees. Well, some of them are just out of whack, and some of them we haven't changed for 30 years, and they're still the same amount. Licensures, we charge a lot for some licenses, and some licenses we don't charge hardly at all. Really, it's a workforce issue. If you're going to come to the state of Iowa and you're going to have to pay $150 for a license, sometimes that, a graduate teacher who's making $32,000 a year, that's a lot of money to pay out just to get the ability to be able to teach. I don't know what the teaching license costs. I just threw that out there at $150 because it sounded like a lot of money. Senator Evans might be able to tell us the cost of that. But that's what I'm saying is, to help the average Joe, we need to reduce property taxes, or at least put some measures on it. When I was walking doors, and I did a lot of door knocking during this last campaign, because I took a good chunk of Representative Jones' district. 48% of my new district is new, which meaning I didn't represent that before. And so I did a lot of door knocking. I did a lot of talking to people. I went to a lot of meetings to find out what people in this new part of the district wanted and were interested in, as well as in the district that I have always represented in Dickinson County. I'll tell you what, number one issue across the board, by far, property taxes. It was the number one issue. Number two issue was education, not necessarily school choice, but educate. Those two were by far the most discussed and thing that people were most concerned about. So property taxes, yes, we need to address that. Not for the property owners, it's necessarily just a loan, but for every Iowan, because every Iowan pays something for those property taxes, whether they own it or not. Income tax, it helps every Iowan. I've heard over and over again, we're just helping the rich people with our income tax cuts. No, every Iowan's going to benefit from those income tax cuts, because as those, let's just say the wealthier people save money, they're going to reinvest that money, they're going to spend that money, and every Iowan's going to benefit. And we're making it so that it's a fair 3.9%. Everybody in the state of Iowa who pays taxes is going to pay 3.9% straight. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. And Representative Jones.
Yeah, so the issue that people just say to me in passing the most, on parades, they'll holler at me, is about daylight savings time. People just want to lock the clocks and be done with it. It screws up kids' schedules. I'm sure it's a nightmare for teachers. It's a nightmare as a parent to readjust these kids on a different schedule. The average person, that's kind of what when I see them in the grocery store, they're like, hey, remember, daylight savings time. Yeah, we got it out of the House last year. There's some things happening on the federal level, but it's probably time that we join the few states that have already went that direction. But a couple of bills that I have introduced specifically for constituents who might not, they might not be, have a big spotlight on them. The direct shipment of liquor. And I'm sure you all are aware of what business I'm talking about, but it is not legal to send liquor from Iowa to another state. And we have gotten to a place in our community and in our state where we have a lot of folks making specialty alcohol that can't be purchased in Florida or in Missouri. We're not talking about Jack Daniels, right? We're talking about specific stuff that's coming from specific places that means something to people, right? And so the direct shipment bill would allow people to ship alcohol across state lines. And that's coming right out of this House district. Child care. So I've got two child care bills. Both of them have been brought to me from constituents. One of them passed out of the, there's one that, one passed out of subcommittee this week. So that would reduce the state income tax, eliminate the state income tax for child care providers. And that's important because it increases their take-home pay, but doesn't put it on the backs of working families. So it doesn't drive up the cost of daycare, but also gets them some more take-home pay. The other one is a little trickier. So when childcare providers accept children who are on state assistance, if the kid would happen to get sick and they're not at childcare that day, the state can't, or the childcare provider can't bill for that time, which I understand, the kid's not there, but it's not like the provider can fill that spot, right? They have to keep the spot open for that kid, so there's no way for them to recover that lost money. And most childcare providers are moving to a contract rate, so it's not that you pay per hour, you just pay a flat fee per week and that's it. So because they have to keep the seat open regardless, right? So that would fill that gap in state funding for those kids who just for some reason or another aren't at childcare that day. And then dyslexia services. So 1 in 5 kids have dyslexia, and there's like 80 different kinds of dyslexia. And this is something that we're still trying to catch up on. And quite honestly, our teachers are overworked already, and getting another certificate or an endorsement is just very difficult, and it's expensive. And so 2 bills there. One would pay for grants for teachers to get dyslexia certification or an endorsement, and then the other one would provide state funding for kids to get private tutoring for dyslexia services. There's a number of entities that provide online tutoring for kids to tackle dyslexia, and it's such an important issue right now, and we just need to do a better job of tackling it.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. You touched on a subject that I was going to bring up, and so we'll go ahead and head down that way and see what other conversation points the others have to add. So let's talk a little bit about childcare, and if there's other points that Senator Rowley, Senator Evans, and Representative Wills would like to add. And with that, Senator Rowley, I will let you add any other comments regarding childcare in the state of Iowa.
Yeah, we saw, of course, during COVID, there were a lot of childcare places, daycares closed down. And as we came through that recovery, it was very slow to recover, or if at all. Last year, of course, we expanded the minimum age for supervision of children in child care to the age of 16. Being unsupervised has caught a lot of flack. But there is supervision, and I voted for that bill, and I think it was a good change. I think it helps support the child care and daycares available to us. There's so many issues here that if we're going to address workforce, if we're going to have people moving into our communities to fill those jobs that we need filled, or just to enjoy the quality of life that we have in Northwest Iowa, the number one issue is, how do I work and how does my child get those daycare services? So it's always out there. I think as we go forward, you'll be seeing more push for that to expand those and some incentives to do that. I like the idea, Representative Jones. I do. I think that's interesting. I think that might be very helpful, actually. But at this time, that's all I can tell you on childcare, and that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And Senator Evans, if you'd like to add anything to the conversation regarding childcare.
Absolutely. In last session, correct me if I'm wrong, but the income level for tax credits increased quite a bit. So that is going to have a positive effect. We've yet to see, but it will over time. The other thing is I'm going to be working on potential legislation on that promotes private and public partnerships. So specifically businesses that would want to partner with the public in starting or expanding child care services. I think that's something that's needed as well. So in addition to what has already been said.
Great. Thank you, Senator Evans. Representative Will.
We did discuss, and I think you sat on the subcommittee, we did discuss some changes in physical requirements for people who are working in child care. So it's COVID started so way back, and that restricted some ability to get in and get your physical for employment. So always been a restriction. You had to have that 30 days prior 30 or 60 days prior to employment. Now it's up to 6 months prior to employment.
Yep.
And assuming it passes. And then they have up to 30 days post-employment to get their physical to work in a child care setting.
Thank you. And Representative Wills.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. We have worked in the House on some child care issues. Going to throw the senators under the bus a little bit. They haven't taken all of those issues up. I really look at it as a workforce issue on two fronts. First of all, it's a workforce issue for the child care facilities. They don't have the employees in which to take care of the people, partially because they can't pay enough because of the reimbursement rates and so forth. You could go work at Quick Star in Spirit Lake for $17 an hour and maybe make $15 an hour as somebody working in a child care facility, and a lot less headaches that go along with it. So really, the people that are working in our child care facilities they love it. But it's also, on another front, it's a workforce issue for parents, because if there's not enough child care available, then one of the parents have to stay home and that sort of thing. So we really need to look at it. It's not a simple solution. It's not a simple thing that we can just say, boom, we're going to do this and it's going to be taken care of. But I want to even broaden it out a little bit further, because all of these face the same circumstances. Child care, nursing homes, specialized care, they're all facing the same issues as far as workforce. They don't have the employees for either one of those three. They're not getting reimbursement rates for any one of those three that can maintain. And look at the nursing homes that have been closing. They're not closing because there's not enough people to put in those nursing homes. They're closing because they're going out of business. They're going broke. So we need to really look at that. But I think they're all three workforce issues and all three things that need to be addressed. And they're all three not easy to fix. There's going to be some things that are going to have to happen on a state level and on a local level. And I think somebody mentioned public-private partnerships. I think that is a wonderful idea. Senator Evans did. A couple years ago, we passed out of the House and sent it to the Senate a workforce. It was a workforce issue where if a private business decided to do a child care facility within its business, that there would be some tax credits available for that. And I think that that's being taken advantage of even in Milford. So that is being done, and it's a pretty significant tax credit. And so that's one thing we've done. We've got a lot more to do, and it's not going to be just one magic bill that fixes it.
Great, thank you. And Representative Jones, did you have anything else you wanted to add regarding childcare?
Yeah, something that we kind of just need to keep in mind from a broad perspective is administrative rules. And poor John Wills always has to hear me talk about administrative rules, and I'm sure my House colleagues are exhausted by talking about administrative rules. But the governor, in her condition of the state address, put a moratorium on administrative rules. There's a whole host of exemptions, but then also she's going to do a red tape review. So so every entity who can write rules, they have to repeal all of their rules and start with a blank sheet of paper. And so when we're talking about the burdensome regulations that child care providers are facing, that will all be rewritten in the next 3 years. So to make sure that the rules are really best situated for our child care facilities. Of course, we want to make sure kids are safe, right? And how to do that the best way possible. But those burdensome regulations will have a good look through over the next 3 years.
Thank you, Representative Jones. The next question, which I will ask, is do you think the DNR should be funded in a way other than through hunting licenses so that they can better protect wildlife and Iowa's natural lands? And with that, we will start with Senator Evans.
I know there's been some motivation to enact the 3/8 cent I-Will that will fund Department of Natural Resources. Personally, I don't like the idea of raising a sales tax because it's a regressive form of tax, and it tends to impact those who make the least. It impacts them the most. So I guess I'm not really enthused about raising a sales tax. But, yeah, I think we can look at different ways of funding the Department of Natural Resources. They do a lot of good work. I'm a person who loves to hunt and fish, so, you know, I would really like to see my license fee go down a little bit, maybe fund it a different way. How's that, on a personal note? So, thanks.
Yes, thank you. And Representative Wills?
You went out of order. You threw me off. So this is going to be a question that I could go for the rest of this session on, and we could talk a half hour or hour on it. It's a big question. I don't know if the questioner realizes that. So right now, our DNR is funded a lot by fees. A few years ago, there was a cry that the state legislature is defunding the DNR. No, what we did was we went back to what code said for air quality issues, and those air quality issues are supposed to be funded by license or permit fees. And so when we allowed the DNR to raise the permit fees, and then we took the general fund money back, and that's the cry. We defunded the DNR. No, the DNR was just funded in a different way by code, and so we'd have to change the code in order to do that. I don't envision ever having a time where we don't fund the DNR without license fees, and this goes back to what I talked about earlier. My hunting license allows me to go out and hunt pheasants, and I love to hunt pheasants, and I love to do that, but it also helps to pay for the DNR wildlife officials, the conservation officers, and the folks, the wildlife folks that support my pheasant hunting and fishing and everything else that I do. Now, not everybody in the state of Iowa hunts. Not everybody, and so when we say let's support those folks in a different way, maybe through a general fund contribution, that kind of makes me think, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's the right way to do that. I'm happy to take a look at it. We can lower our hunting fees down, $5 or something like that. But it's just a tough thing. I have been working for the last 3 years to fund the IWIL, which would not fully fund the Iowa DNR or the IDALS, Iowa Department of Agriculture, but because those fees would still be there. And so as far as the license fees and that sort of thing, and so we really need to look at, I think, we need to look at IWIL, we need to look at that because that is a serious possibility to help to refund the DNR and the IDALS. But it has to be done, in my mind, in a way that we're not raising sales tax on every Iowan. Senator Dan Dawson and I have been working for the last 2 years on a proposal that would, I think, is the solution. It doesn't raise the sales tax, but it shifts some things around. It's very complex, and this is where I could talk for the next half hour just on that proposal alone. But I would say that every one of us in this room are affected by the hunting and fishing fees that are paid. If you go watch deer out in the wildlife area, that was probably helped out by the fees. So should every Iowan have a stake to play in some of every Iowan should have a partial role. But when I'm actually going out there and harvesting a pheasant to take home for my meal, I believe that not every Iowan should pay for that. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where I stand. I know that you're familiar with all the wildlife aspects of it, but wildlife, fisheries, all of that stuff is very complex, and I think that what we have right now is those that use the resource the most pay for those resources.
Thank you, Representative Wills. And Senator Rowley.
I would agree with Representative Wills that those who use those resources, through licensing and fees, support that. I'm certainly not an expert in this field, so I'd have to defer to the people who are more familiar with hunting and licensing. But so I have really nothing more to add to the conversation.
Thank you. And Representative Jones.
Ditto. Yeah, no, I'm happy to take a look at it. I haven't seen any bills come forward, but happy to take a look at it.
Great, thank you. One of the topics that was always discussed at last year's Eggs and Issues, and certainly at the state legislature, was mental health. keeping in mind the amount of time that we have left, if you would like to go ahead and briefly discuss where the mental health conversation is at the state level, and we will start with Representative Jones.
Well, this is a perfect time to start talking about this because I don't think that there is a silver bullet to address all of our mental health issues, but one thing Representative Wills and I have been working on passed off the House floor, and I talked a little bit about it in my opening comments, about non-compete agreements. And so we get a lot of young folks who graduate, get their degree, get licensed, and get a job up here, and then they decide that maybe the facility that they work in is not for them. But unfortunately, when they were hired, they signed a 2-year, 100-mile non-compete agreement. Now, a court's probably not going to uphold that, and certainly these young folks could take them to court to get that non-compete agreement tossed, but when you're 22, 24 years old, fighting the man is just not a realistic opportunity. And they're mobile, so what do? They move. They move away, they get married, and they have their babies elsewhere. And we, in this area, have lost a fantastic provider. Not to mention, clients of these providers have lost their provider. And that just starts a whole nother process and problem. So the bill that we passed off the House floor says we're not doing non-compete agreements when it comes to mental health services because we want people to stay in our communities. We have such an incredible need for mental health providers that we want them to stay in our communities and not be locked out by an unreasonable non-compete agreement. So that headed over to the Senate, and I'm going to petition my senators to vote for that. Thank you.
That's a perfect segue. So Senator Rowley, if you would go ahead and just talk a little bit about mental health.
Well, mental health, the conversation I've had, I believe the Medicaid reimbursement and certain things along that line also fit into this. Last year, we passed a bill in the Senate increasing the beds to 12 for adults, 12 for juveniles over into Cherokee. And I'm not sure where that went from there, but I believe it passed out of the Senate. So we're trying to work on providing better services for those patients. A bill I'm running right now has to do with prescribing psychologists. If there's a primary care physician working with a psychologist on a collaborative agreement, that even PATs can prescribe medication for people that are in need and need those prescriptions, and working with the psychiatrist or the professional that oversees that. So that's one area that we're trying to get more people involved in that, provide that support. It is a big issue. When we first met for caucus this session, and Senator Evans was there too, and I think you brought it up as well, we're hearing a lot about this. And as far as the whole arrangement, the whole setup, it definitely needs our support, our attention, and there's several bills in Health and Human Services that are going to address some of those issues. In my personal experience on this, I had a father call me last July, and just distraught because his son was just having a horrible time. And anyway, long story short, sadly, we got him in touch with the people that he needed, but he did try to attempt suicide, and now he's doing well, I understand. But these are the real life situations. We also have the community centers as Cherokee, or let's say Glenwood, we're closed. You have people that are moving to more localized support centers that they need more support. It puts more pressure on counties, puts more pressure on the regional hospitals. There's a lot of issues behind the scenes. It's like that onion. You just start looking at the different layers. So all of these issues are very, they're out there. We're aware of them, and I just say overall that you will see a lot of bills coming out of the Senate as far as addressing the mental health concerns.
Great, thank you. And Senator Evans.
One of the reasons why I requested to be on the Health and Human Services this issue directly. It's been something that has been on my mind for a long time as a school administrator and just as a citizen in Northwest Iowa. And it goes back to access to mental health care services in rural Iowa. Wait times to get treated can be measured in not only weeks, but in some cases months. And if you have an issue with mental health, and especially dealing with young families and children, it's an issue that needs to be addressed now, not 2 weeks from now, not 3 months from now. So I was on the same subcommittee with Senator Rowley about the prescribing psychologists and reworking how that is going to work. And I think that's going to have a positive effect in rural Iowa because that's one of the areas that we're lacking is psychiatrists and psychologists who have the ability to prescribe under the direction of a medical professional. So it's going to make that easier. The other one that's running through committee right now that I was on the subcommittee is establishing a professional counselor licensure compact. So what that would do is make it easier for somebody to actually come into the state of Iowa from another state and practice here, addressing some of the workforce issues with licensed counselors. I think that's going to have a big improvement. I hope that makes it through the floor and over into the other chamber. And I do want to let Representative Jones know that you don't have to lobby me very hard on the change in non-compete, because I do believe, and I've heard that as I've gone around to and talked to mental health providers across Northwest Iowa, that's a big one. If you lose your counselor or the person that's providing services for you, you have to tell your story again. And what's happening is we get licensed counselors, we get psychologists, we get psychiatrists practicing out here, and they don't stay very long. So you're asking that person that is having a need for mental health services to continually tell their story, and that does not help them in any manner. So we've got to make ways so people can leave maybe the place that they're working in now, stay in Northwest Iowa, and still provide those services without having to move miles away or out of state to continue in their profession. So, yeah, you don't have to lobby me hard on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Evans. And Representative Wills, if you would go ahead and talk briefly about mental health and your position on that, and also I will let you go ahead and segue into closing comments after you're done with mental health.
Okay. Thank you for the question. So I do believe we're in a mental health crisis. I've said that for I don't know how many years now. This is I'm going into my 9th year. Probably at least 6 years I've said that. And it's not something, again, that can be easily fixed. I believe this is true, but we passed, for several years in a row now, we have passed a telehealth bill out of the House, but it has met resistance in the Senate. We in Northwest Iowa, we in rural Iowa desperately need the ability to have telehealth for psychiatrists and psychologists and that sort of thing, because we can't always pay enough for those people to be in Northwest Iowa. And so if we can have those folks be in Iowa City or in Des Moines and have access to them, that's at least something. And so we need to do that. We need to really look forward to doing that and using our technology. Last year or the year before, we took over the mental health levy so that your county is no longer asking you to pay a mental health levy. The state of Iowa is now paying a mental health levy. And I think that's going to end up being a great thing, because we're going to see a very much consistent use of funds across the state. So we're no longer going to have, this group of counties have this set of services. We're going to have the same services across the state of Iowa, and that's going to help fix a lot of the issues that we're talking about. I believe it's a workforce issue, and I think we've all touched on that. We're having trouble pulling in psychiatrists, and we're having trouble bringing these people to Northwest Iowa or to our rural Iowa. We have done some things as far as giving psychiatrists extra cost share to their schools, extra scholarships to schools, as long as they promise to stay in Iowa for a period of time. That's not going to fix it, but it's something. We have a mental health problem in our schools. Many times we have excuse me, we have children that are just not being served well in our schools because the schools don't have the resources in which to serve those children. I want to touch base with you on this because I think we have a bureaucracy problem as well. This is an example that I helped a foster family through this last summer. It's a child he's an 8-year-old child. I'm not going to say the town because it's a very small town. In my district that I just left, House District, the old House District 1, this child was 8 years old, as I said, had a foster family that very much so cared for him. The biological father was involved in the foster care child's life as much as the law would allow. He no longer had custody or the ability to have that child in his life anymore, but the child was being well served by the foster family. The state of Iowa said that child would be best served in a home in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And that home costs about $350,000 a year. Whereas the foster family said, we want to take care of this child. We want to take care of it, but guess what? We both have to work a job. Both the foster mom and dad both had to work a job in order to afford to take care of that child and other foster children that they have. And so I kept asking the Department of Human Services folks, wouldn't it be better if we just paid that foster family $100,000? We'd be $200,000 ahead. But because of the bureaucracy, that just doesn't happen. It can't happen. We are spending so much money over and over again across the state of Iowa on example after example just like that. And it's frustrating to know that we've got the money. We've got the money in mental health. It's just being foolishly spent. And I got to go, and I know. So I'm going to just say that's my closing comment. Thank you.
Thank you. You know when my microphone comes on, it's like, yep, it's time to keep moving. So
I was going over.
that's okay. Representative Jones, if you would go ahead and take a couple of minutes just to give us your closing comments.
Sure. I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting. It's always very exciting to be here, and we certainly appreciate your efforts and providing breakfast for everyone, too. I think the next one, when's the next Stakes and Issues?
Yep, the next one is on February 25th, and I'll give a brief reminder of that as
Wonderful.
well. Yep.
Wonderful. So hopefully we'll be able to see you all there. I do really appreciate the thoughtful discussion that we've had here today, but over the last couple of weeks, because I know it's the beginning of session, we really get rolling fast, and I do appreciate hearing from folks. You can email me, text me, whatever, but I appreciate those thoughtful conversations that we've been able to have as bills kind of roll through the chambers. And these forums are not the only time to talk to us. Please feel free to reach out anytime. Thanks.
Thank you. And Senator Evans, your closing comments.
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation this morning. Having been in those chairs on the other side a number of times, this has always been one of the more professionally run forums that I attend. So thank you for the invitation. It's really been a treat. So, and I want to echo Representative Jones' sentiments. Anytime you have concern, a comment, feel free to fire us an email or reach out, even call, and I'll return a call. So. The big things as we move forward, though, that I want to really point out, we talk tax, we talk mental health, we've talked education. The biggest thing I think that needs to come out of this legislative session deals with workforce, and you've heard that come up in every single topic that we've talked about today. We're talking about workforce and mental health, nursing homes, health care, education, childcare, private sector and business. It's a topic that it's a big one to get your arms around, no doubt about it. But I think we need to take it on because if Iowa's economy is going to keep moving forward as it has, workforce is going to be the limiting factor in that. So with that, we'll see you again in February, and please reach out if you have any comments or concerns.
Thank you, Senator Evans. And Senator Rowley.
I echo what Senator Evans said. I concur. I agree. Workforce is a huge issue. It's the spine of everything. It's going to be affecting all of the committees I'm on, whether it's commerce, whether it's judicial, whether it's human and health services. All of those dovetail into the workforce issue. The other issue that I think is very important too, and something we should keep in mind too, of the quality of life in Northwest Iowa and in the districts we represent is so high quality that we may not realize just what an opportunity we have for getting that workforce built up. We have businesses here in Spencer and all up and down the corridor that are looking for workers. And we need to get that word out even more than we have. We really do. And the things that we do as your legislators, we're working very hard together to make not only Iowa better, but definitely Northwest Iowa and our districts better as well. And we try to finally be very keen as to what the issues are, and that's why it's so important to have that communication. I want to thank you, Sharifa, and everybody for being here, and I do have a newsletter out there, as we all do, on the tables, and we look forward to the next forum.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Senator Rowley. On behalf of the Spencer Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank everyone for coming today, and to those who submitted questions. You can always email us questions. We will hold those for future exit issues, or like each of our legislators mentioned, feel free to reach out to them individually. Thank you to our area legislators who are willing to give of their time on the weekend and share current information about what is happening at the State House. Thank you especially to the Spencer Police Department, Spencer Radio Group, Spencer Daily Reporter, Spencer Municipal Utilities, and MediaCom for being here and covering this forum. The next Eggs and Issues session will be on Saturday, February 25th, right here in the City Council chambers. Please feel free to grab newsletters. We also have our Thrive publication, which is a publication of the Spencer Chamber. Thank you again.